So for the people who just joined us, good morning. Thanks for joining Sigfox Connect. So here will be the execution stage today, and it will be your host for today and tomorrow. So today we'll start with a first session, and so I will introduce you to the few speakers who are joining us. So first we'll get Benjamin Grease, who will be the moderator of that session, and he will be joined by Daniel Sanderson from PFK, as well as Daniel Bunnett from Loscam. And don't be surprised, during that presentation, that discussion, we will get Budi Djojo from DHL, which is currently in a vision stage, who will join us during that discussion. So please, Benjamin, I hand over to you now to start the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. It's not working? Oh. Hello everyone, thank you very much, and welcome. So now it's not? Hello? Is it better? No? Hello? Oh, now it's working. Right. Hello, everyone. So welcome here, and thank you. So we're going to talk now about asset tracking. As we saw a little bit earlier in operations, there are many blind areas. We just don't know what's happening. So when you don't know what's happening, it's hard to work the process, to optimize them. And we believe, and my experience in operation consulting over the years, and it's proven me that IoT has this potential to provide cheaply new data, to know what's happening, and eventually to run the processes and to optimize them, whether it's in transport, whether it's in transformations of industrial processes, or asset tracking. We're going to talk about it today. So you might wonder, well, we've done it before. There were other technologies, but they failed in many cases. GSM, very expensive. RFID, with unpractical sometimes with the portals. But Sigfox and IoT has different. It's cheaper and with less infrastructures. Now, if we look at asset tracking, there are a whole wide range of assets, as you can see here on the top, from wide value, wide size, wide complexity, sometimes dangerous, sometimes very simple. There's the two extremes being, let's say, the pallets or rail tanks. But they all share common points. They're complex to manage, and they are significant, they are impacting your operational performance. First of all, because they're numerous. You have hundreds, sometimes millions, sometimes hundreds of millions, as we'll see. And overall, it's actually a huge amount of money that you have to manage. And from experience, it tends to be highly under-optimized because precisely, actually, we don't know what's happening. We don't know where they are. Sometimes we lose them. And so we take buffers everywhere. And the fleets are over-inflated. And why is it hard to manage? Because, science is obvious, but it's good to remind that eventually, these assets are mobile. They're going everywhere, between your clients, between your sites, sometimes across countries, sometimes in remote areas, like in oil fields, for instance. So knowing where they are, whether they're used, is just extremely complex. And the management is manual. It's because it tends to be sometimes a side business that it's not necessarily the most optimized process, and of course, it doesn't have any data. But we believe that to actually implement the processes and optimize them, for example, run the invoicing automatically, connecting these assets allows to get more efficient, more automated. And there are numerous use cases from most simple ones to complex ones. For instance, the obvious one we think about would be locating, would be having alerts. Where is my stuff? Where are my machines? Or where they shouldn't be? And then we get more complex ones that are more linked to the content. Is it full? Is it not full? Is it used? What is it carrying on? And then am I late? So I'm linking the asset with what's inside. So I can link with procurement, with transport management, and visibility clients. I'm not going to run through all of these, but of course I'll let you review that there are a whole range of value that we can bring. But IoT is making these use cases possible, profitable, because it's getting cheaper. And even some cases, it's becoming mature, that even we can take on-the-shelf solutions to deploy them. And from our experience with clients over the few years, usually clients come to me and to my fellows and say, okay, I have a use case. What is the solution? And we start with that. What is the sensor? What is the network? Which cloud should we use? Well, very pragmatical questions to refine the use case. And it works in always a bit the same in, of course, assets, but containers, like we did with Michelin and SafeCube. I would say pallets, plastic pallets for industrial flows, for shelves, for bottle of gas, and other materials. A bit the same. And it's necessary to understand the use case and constraints. But it's not enough. It's not enough to focus on the solution. You might end up with a gadget that doesn't really meet the needs of the users, or with a white elephant, something that does meet, but eventually is super expensive, because there are some costs that were not thought about. And it's not what you want. You want, of course, a success, something that brings value to your company and to your clients. And for that, you need to embrace dimensions that are eventually fairly classical to any transformation program, any new proposal, which are thinking about deployment and users, thinking about the business case and all its components, and now a new one, which is the environment. And companies do think about it, and I hope it's getting more and more there. And these happen in everywhere when you have ERP transformation project or supply chain improvement, or any transformation in your company. And IoT is the same. It's not only a solution, it's as well a transformation. And when we look at the deployment, it can be, what does it bring to your clients, to your teams? Clients, we think about the offers, the services. The teams can be the process, how they link with the other ecosystem of architectures, and then how to transform it with the training, with change management, etc. And business case, of course, what will be the metric, what makes it a success? Where's the value? How can you invoice the service? What are the cost elements doing? And environment, this new data is rich to help you set new goals and measuring them, even beside the IoT itself. How does it impact your own sheet? So as you can see, and this whole logic is iterative, of course. So today we're going to talk about this with a panel. We're going to discuss how to deploy and execute transformation and asset tracking. So first, I'll let Daniel Bunnett from Loscam present us his transformation. We can applaud him.
Thank you, Benjamin. Is that working? Yep, a bit louder maybe. Well, good morning, everybody. My name's Daniel Bunnett, and it's my privilege to be part of this panel today and introduce you to a business which I've been working for nearly 20 years now. And if you'd asked me 12 months ago whether or not I'd be sitting here talking at a tech expo, particularly my children would say, that would never happen, because I still rely on them heavily to do simple things like set up a phone. But it's amazing how quickly we can learn and how quickly this area is evolving, and the opportunities it's creating for businesses, even like ours, which is very much a mature business. I will just take a few minutes to take you through the Loscam story, an overview of who we are, our core business in asset pooling and what that actually means, some of the risk associated in the work that we do, the track and trace journey so far, which we're still very much on a learning stage, and then also a key learnings from successful deployment which we have made earlier this year. So Loscam was founded in my hometown of Melbourne in 1942, and if you look at our core business since then, it always has been fundamentally the wooden pallet. And for most people, 15 pieces of timber and 103 nails and a coat of paint isn't very exciting, but for us, it's something that we're very passionate about. And if you think about it, the pallets are everywhere, and an essential part of all supply chains in moving inventory from A to B to C. So that's been our core business, and over a period of time, we developed a pooling model, which meant that customers could come to us and hire assets as opposed to buying them and then trying to recover the asset as part of their distribution, or try and recover the cost of that pallet. And subsequently, if you wind the clock forward around 75 years, we're now Asia Pacific's largest pallet pooling company. We have over 100 depots operating across the region, tens of thousands of customers, and we have been successful in rolling out the pooling model in most markets. We've also evolved our business importantly, so we're not just a pallet company. Even though we do have variations of the pallet itself, we've also gone into containers, IBCs, Palicon collapsible stillages, collar surrounds, lids, and then also in the last sort of 10 years or so, there's been a very strong push around retail-ready packaging, which we're also part of. But all of these products are out in the market, as said, in that pooled environment. So what does a pooling model look like? Well, there's what we say is an evolution of pooling, and it really starts in most markets as what we would call a static pool. And that is, we would go into a market, for instance, if we look at a market like Vietnam or Philippines, Indonesia, where you have maybe an FMCG company has a lot of pallets in their facility. Rather than spending capital and buying those pallets, we give them the opportunity of hiring them. And then they're paying a daily hire rate, and we manage the refurbishment and repair and management process. Eventually, we try and evolve that to stage 2, where they may have another trading partner, might be a 3PL warehouse facility, and they may be exchanging or moving pallets between those two facilities. And then ultimately, we get to stage 3, and which is what we enjoy in Australia, our most mature market, and probably the most evolved pooling market in the world. And that is that we can have that one pallet can be issued to a packaging company that could then supply packaging into a manufacturer who will then produce their goods, store it on our pallet, distribute it then into a transporter 3PL, who then will move it directly into a retailer, who will then move it into a store, back to DC, and then back to one of our facilities. And that cycle can take 3 to 4 months out in the supply chain for that single pallet use. And that creates enormous efficiency. So we're talking about environmental benefits. As I said, we like to think that Loscam has been promoting a very sustainable, very environmental conscious model for a long, long time. We're very proud of that. But it does create some complexities as well. So one of the downfalls of pooled environment is the situation where a customer will actually not track the asset. So pooling works very well, and we're very good at driving that model and building wonderful relationships with customers. But I can tell you the one way to sour that relationship very quickly is when you have to go and talk to them about the fact that they've lost your equipment. And not only are they paying a daily hire charge for that equipment whilst it's lost, they ultimately at the end of the day, if they can't return the asset, they have to pay a compensation rate. And so in their mind, of course, they've already paid for it in hire, and then they would have been better off buying the pallet or whatever asset it is in the first place. So this is one of the key pitfalls. And so for Loscam, in trying to address that issue with our customers, for a long time now, we've been looking at trying to make our assets smarter. And we actually did our first trial of track and trace over 10 years ago. We have an expensive stillage unit. We actually purchased a GPS tracking device for around $500 at the time, if I recall correctly. We were paying about $70 a month for it to talk to a satellite on probably a 3G network, and the battery life was an impressive 7 days. So even though that did the job, and it told the customer where the asset was or where the goods were moving to, the cost itself was extremely prohibitive. From that point on, we've seen other technologies come along. RFID came along in our industry, and a lot of people got very excited about that, about the potential of tracking assets. But I think people soon realised that RFID was really only as good as the infrastructure that was in place. You scan it in, you scan it out, but once it's scanned out, what happens out there in the market? You don't have that visibility, that transparency. So it really wasn't until the IoT solution sort of arrived, which all of a sudden, and the connectivity cost, we actually became something which was far more feasible, and also the cost of the hardware associated was getting a lot smarter, and the price was coming down significantly. So we actually did a proof of concept trial with a major customer who was moving chiller goods from Sydney to Melbourne, and when we did this initially, that was really purely around validating the merits of the Sigfox, or in our region, Thinkstra, the retailer network, and actually the fact that you do have that visibility. And one of the really interesting things is as we were tracking this customers' goods down from Sydney to Melbourne, we noticed that the temperature of the goods was getting colder and colder, and it set off certain alarms. What we're actually able to identify is not only the location of the asset and the goods in movement, but the temperature. They'd actually put it into they put it in a refrigerated truck. So they were actually able to swap out the trucks, salvage the goods, and all of a sudden there was sort of a lightning bulb moment for us. It's like, well, tracking the pallet or whatever asset it is pretty important, but the data that's being generated through actually in that process, the additional data that you can source actually has enormous value to that customer as well. So that really then did set us off on the path, and we got very serious around trying to set this up and say make this work for our business on a larger scale. We determined that we had to incorporate more than just live tracking, so we had to sort of really start to understand what type of alarms would customers value, whether it be temperature related, whether something had been opened or closed, whether geofencing, letting notifications around when things were arriving or getting close to its location, stored data, and so on. And we're very, very proud of the fact that we've been able to now take this to the final stage where we actually have our first paying customer in Australia. And now at this stage, the solution itself is with our high value assets. So it's a collapsible stillage used in the automotive industry for shipping spare parts out to dealerships. And they were in a static environment. So we're able to do that, a soft launch of that earlier this year. And the information or the feedback that we got from the customer very early in this journey was quite incredible. From the 220 units in which we'd fitted the track and trace device to, within the first 4 months we identified 5% of those units that had actually found their way to a competitor's warehouse. There was an additional 8% of units that had actually gone outside their own third-party logistic provider network. And there was one unit which actually had made its way 3,500 kilometres from Melbourne across to Perth, across the Nullarbor, where they didn't have any operations in Perth. So all those units, which is about 14% of its total stock holding, may not have been lost under the old model. They probably would have found them, most of them, over time. Some of them certainly would have been. They were able to recover them in quick time, and to the extent where they're actually therefore looked at their total holding of inventory and said we can actually reduce that by 25%. So you might look at that from a Loscam perspective and think, well, that's not good. Our customers actually decreasing the amount of assets in which they require. But for us, we think that's a huge win. It's actually giving these assets new life, new opportunity, giving customer greater insight, and for us strengthening that relationship. So we're very much committed to having this rolled out on a full scale. The challenge for us over time will make sure that the cost of the hardware comes down to the point where it does perhaps justify going into a wooden pallet itself, which is obviously a low value asset. But as I said, for our experience so far and where we're at, we're very excited about the future and what it can do for our business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll invite Daniel Sanderson from PFK to as well share with us his experience.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone, my name is Dan. Am I on? I am now. So PFK Technologies is a automotive security systems design and manufacture facility. We are a South African company, and we're headquartered in Durban, South Africa, which is on the east coast of South Africa. We have a couple of branches. One is in California, which I head up, and we have another one in London. We've got three primary product focuses. First one is vehicle security systems, basically they're car alarms. The second one would be telematics, so stolen vehicle recovery, fleet management systems, that sort of thing. And our third product line is alcohol breathalyzers. We sell the breathalyzers into two different streams. One is the government legislated offender programs that are based in America and Canada. And the second place would be for the private security sector, where taxis, buses, ferry drivers, that sort of thing. Europe is becoming more prevalent in requiring all of their drivers in the private sector to have some sort of alcohol breathalyzer fitted to their vehicle. Our California office, which I head up, basically exists to serve one customer. The customer is called SWDS, and they are a dealer services provider. So they provide services to car dealerships across Southern California. They provide finance and insurance products, extended warranties, paint and chip protection, that sort of thing, as well as hardware security products that get fitted into every car at a dealership, and that's where PFK comes in. So what are some of the challenges that Southwest face and the car dealerships as a whole? The first one is security. In California, at least, car dealerships can have a massive amount of inventory. It's quite common for any one car dealership to have between 500 and 1,000 cars on its inventory list at any point in time. And dealerships that have upwards of 2,000 vehicles is not uncommon. In fact, this dealership here is an account of ours. To give you some perspective, from top to bottom of this picture is about 1.5 kilometers, and this dealership averages 1,800 to 2,000 vehicles at any point in time. So having these vehicles being secure is super, super important to these dealerships. The second major challenge that they face is the location of these vehicles. Obviously, if you've got 2,000 cars sitting on a parking lot and you want to know where a particular car is, it can take you quite some time to find it. Often these cars are all parked in very, very close to each other and they park each other in. So if you want to move a particular vehicle and there's 3 other vehicles that you need to move before you can get to that vehicle, you need to know which keys you need to take with you in order to get that particular vehicle out. So dealerships pride themselves on being efficient and being able to get vehicles out quickly to customers. They really need to know where the vehicles are. The third major challenge that they face is vehicle access history. When salesmen are accessing vehicles, it kind of becomes very important to know who last accessed it so that they can find the keys. Often keys go missing, they don't get put back where they're supposed to have been. If a scratch mysteriously appears on a brand new car, they really, really want to know which salesman had taken that car for a test drive. Also, if things like the floor mats tend to go missing very often at dealerships. We get requests all the time from car dealerships to say, can you figure out who last accessed this car so we can solve an internal staff dispute? Another challenge that they face are any kind of mechanical issues with the vehicle, or things like low battery or fuel. Even though these are all brand new vehicles, obviously the dealerships keep as low amount of fuel as possible in the car, but they really don't want it to run out of fuel while it's on a test drive. So if they can know ahead of time exactly how much fuel is left. Same thing goes for batteries. Even though they're brand new vehicles, these cars sometimes sit for 2-3 weeks, maybe a month on a particular dealership lot, and the batteries do drain. It's not a great look for a dealership if the car doesn't start when they're trying to take it for a test drive. Other things that they really value are things like CAN bus diagnostics, any other health checks that they can get their hands on is highly valued by dealerships. Another challenge that they face is inventory management. Which cars have been sold, which cars are in the process of being sold. If they can get up-to-date data on those sort of lists, they'll put big value in those. And then the final challenge that they face is upsell and conversion rates of third-party additional insurance warranties and all the conversions of extended warranties that get placed on the vehicles. So dealerships put big value on having all of this information on hand. Traditionally, at least in the American sector, most of the stuff is done manually, and obviously it's very, very inefficient. So how did PFK address some of these challenges? Well, we developed a product called the HP, or the HP range. Our latest product is HP7S, S standing for Sigfox. Basically, in dealer mode, it can provide all of these security features that the dealerships want. The major security feature is that it immobilizes the vehicle. So every car on the lot is immobilized. The vehicle cannot drive unless it's disarmed by our system. We can disarm it either by a universal key fob that we design and manufacture, or using a cell phone that we pair to the unit, and then we can use Sigfox to unlock the vehicle and disarm the car. In addition to giving the security system through the immobilizer, if we can give the car dealerships the ability to access each vehicle through the car locks, they don't need to carry the individual keys around for each vehicle. they put big value in that. Then we can also report things like the battery voltage, the alarm status. We can do firmware upgrades over the air. Obviously, for things like firmware upgrades, we can't use Sigfox for that because the downlink data is too big. So for that, we had to develop a separate proprietary RF protocol. There's a couple of screenshots of our connected dealership portal that a dealership would have access to. They can see things like the GPS location, who last accessed the vehicle, where and when that access occurred. They can get the battery voltage over time. They can see the fuel level, and they can get all the access history. And it's just a screenshot of the app that we use to do that. Now, obviously, all of these features happen just in dealer mode. The car eventually gets sold. These units are all installed. It's a deep install, so it's not convenient to remove the unit before it's being sold. So we leave the unit inside the vehicle. And that's where we can really leverage Sigfox for post-sales connectivity. Dealerships are increasingly
No, it's not working. I can tell you were laughing, right?
Can you introduce Budi?
Now?
It's hard to do. It's tiring.
He's still speaking.
Testing? Yeah.
I use this one. Okay, we are now. So after a vehicle has been sold, we can really leverage Sigfox in the post-sale event. Dealerships are increasingly asking us to give information back to the dealerships on things like driver behavior patterns, what the odometer reading is. Now, a lot of vehicles today have connectivity inside them. They've got some sort of a SIM card. They're connected to the GSM network. However, most of that data goes directly back to the manufacturer, not necessarily to the dealership. The dealership is blind to most of that data. Dealerships put big value in being able to retain you as a customer so that you come back to that same dealership to service the car, get new tires, and that sort of thing. And they want to be able to proactively contact the customer to say, hey, you're due for an oils change, or your tires are due for change. And they can send you a coupon in the mail or contact you via email the week before the event. At the moment, they kind of guesstimate that that's the intervals and the frequencies of which they need to send that out. So what we're going to do is we're using Sigfox to send the dealerships the OBD data, which we get the odometer readings, and we can also send them anything like the check engine light status, GPS positions, and they can get all the driver history that they want. So our use case currently is that we are about to certify this device for Sigfox. We're hoping to certify it in January, so we haven't actually sold any yet other than prototypes, and we're hoping to roll it out in mid-Q1 2020.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Let me.
Yeah, so just before we go further, let me introduce Budi Djojo from DHL. Please join the discussion from the vision stage, just joining now. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. There you go. Thank you for presenting your initiatives, PFK and Loscam. Now we'll go to the questions to review what would be your experience in deploying and assessing the business cases, and then the environmental impacts of the solutions that you set. We'll start with the deployment. What, from your experience, would be the common pitfalls and possibly the good tips that you learned to succeed in deploying and executing IoT? Maybe I'll start with you, Bojo.
Start with me. Okay.
Yes.
The common pitfall is actually understanding what it is that you're trying to solve, right? What it is that you're trying to do, and the main part of it is actually defining what is your success criteria after you've done this. How are you going to measure that? That's one. And second is communication. You need to communicate with your people, tell them, because change is never comfortable for anyone, right? For us, it's always not about the technology, it's about engaging our people, explaining to them what this means to them, how does their work, their life looks like after this is said and done. So that will be my key takeaway for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And you, Daniel? What,
I would say for us, it's making sure that the customer understands what IoT is. Everybody understands what a GSM network is and how that kind of data and connectivity works, but they don't want to pay those prices. They hear about IoT, they hear that Sigfox has uplink and downlink, but they often don't understand the limitations involved in that and the limitations of the data size that you can send, and as well as the number of downlink messages that you can send. So we end up having to have some fairly robust discussions with our customers after the fact, and we're learning how to be proactive and making sure that they understand the limitations of the technology. Everybody gets excited about the price for Sigfox or IoT, and then they don't really understand or don't listen about the limitations of the technology. So.
thank you. Daniel?
I guess similar to both Daniel and Budi. For us, I think it's just not getting caught in the trap of trying to find the cheapest available solution and making sort of key assumptions around what's going to work for your customer. In our story, I talked about our original motivation was around tracking our asset, which is valuable, and the customer will benefit from that. But there is also so much more that they can benefit from in also additional information. And so if you sort of rush a deployment and making key assumptions around what you think that they want, you might find yourself coming up short. So I think it really is taking that time to sort of go out there and engage, really listen, and keep your mind open that, there's more expensive solutions, but the customer might be very willing to pay for that as long as you have the ability to deliver it. The other additional complication is at the back end part, particularly for our business, because as I said, it's not as simple as having a range of equipment in a closed environment. We have customers that are transacting between each other, so we need to be able to have a system where the visibility is for customer A, but when that customer A moves the goods to customer B, their visibility ends and their visibility starts. And that doesn't sound too complicated, but as we're discovering, it's actually very complicated. So you just got to be patient, take the time and make sure that you're partnering with very capable suppliers and vendors in ensuring that you do it right the first time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now, we also talked about the business case, which can be a challenge to beyond the solution to prove the value and for you and as well for your clients. So here would be the challenge that we face. How would you identify and ensure that you covered all the, I would say, the cost and value elements and to potentially prioritize them? And after that, are you able to always quantify? Is it easy from your experience to quantify these elements of value, of cost, to feed your business case and ensure that you reach value? Maybe Daniel with...
This is, for us, this is actually one of the greatest challenges. Subsequently, I've got our CFO for Loscam sitting here in the audience as all part of the help justification process when trying to make sure that we're spending adequate money in getting this solution to market. But I think also, the quantifying piece is for us. I can certainly determine how much the customer is willing to pay ultimately. But then I think that the other thing is that my belief is that this is just going to become such an expectation from the market that if you're not doing it, then you're running the risk of losing customers. So it becomes as much as account retention. It does about new business as well. And so putting a price in that is challenging. But look, as said, I think that that sort of just ties back into it's a process of discovery. And you need to be very closely engaged with all the key stakeholders in getting constant feedback throughout that process in sort of making those decisions.
Thank you. Maybe Daniel, do you want to share your experience in this?
For us, it can be quite difficult to. Am I still on? 1, 2. For us, it can be quite difficult to quantify some of the value adds or to put a monetary value onto it, because car dealerships will come to us and say, we want to know what the battery voltage is of all the cars on the lot. And we say, well, obviously, how much is that worth to you? potentially it could be worth them losing the sale of a vehicle if the car battery is dead. So you could argue that it's the cost of the vehicle. More often than not, though, it's the ease of convenience for the dealership just to be able to know where and when they need to go and charge which vehicles, rather than doing a blunt force approach. So for us, it comes down to sitting down with the dealership, trying to identify their needs versus their wants. Oftentimes, they will want real-time GPS location with like 1 minute resolution all the time. And you sit down with them and say, well, you don't really need that. You don't need to report the GPS location all the time. If the car is off, you know it probably hasn't moved, so we don't need to report it when it's off, and you take it from there.
Budi?
So yes, I agree with both Dan. I think the financial return is one of the key criteria, and I would like to add a couple of more. There are times in the past 1 to 2 years, I do see that happen, that our leadership actually took the leap of faith. It's a bit hazy in terms of financial return, but those are the times that, you know what, let's just do it, and we'll see it from there.
Okay.
But again, it's always about, to your point, how we put a price tag to what we do, and whether that price tag is something that our customer agrees with.
Thank you. Speaking about leap of faith, there is a question of the environment, which as well getting more and more into the decision making of supply chain and operations, and particularly as you mentioned as well for the pallets and other assets. Is it getting now into as well the decision that you're making? Are you able to quantify it, and do you share these issues with your clients? Does it feed potentially your clients' objectives as well in environments?
Yeah, again, I'm not the subject matter expert, but in terms of this, but within the company for the past few years, we have a Go Green initiative. Our target is to be zero carbon emission by 2050. I do believe we have a very, very structured way of measuring our carbon footprint, and that is something that we do on every year. And on top of that, for every new business sign up or every business renewal, Go Green is actually part of the evaluation within the leadership, whether this is something that is enough effort that we put in to save the environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Daniel, is environment something worked at PFK?
I'm going to use the example of car battery voltages again. So when we have a huge dealership that's got 2,000 vehicles on the lot, and they're trying to make sure that all the vehicles are charged, what they'll do is once a week send the porters down the lot and run each vehicle for about 15 minutes just to make sure that the batteries are charged. So that's a blunt force approach. And it's not great for the environment, obviously, because you've got 2,000 vehicles idling for 15 minutes each, and most of them don't actually need to be idled. It's only maybe 1 or 2% of those vehicles that really need to get charged up. So how we try to push the environmental thing is saying that with our solution, you can be proactive about choosing which vehicles you actually need to be charged up, and your carbon emissions can become much closer to net zero by only charging the vehicles that need to be charged rather than all of them.
Thank you. Daniel?
Yeah, so I think that I touched on a little bit in my opening address around the efficiency gains that have already been realised by our first customer in this space, being able to reduce the amount of units in which they're requiring. That therefore would mean a reduction in transportation requirements because they're getting that visibility, and it just leads to efficiency. We also look at it from a waste perspective as well. A lot of our lost assets in the market ultimately do finish in landfill, so you're removing a lot of that because, as I said, you're recovering the asset. And then also in the other example that we utilised around the the goods that were being perished in transit, and that visibility avoided those goods being lost due to being frozen or defrosted or whatever it might be. So again, there's a knock-on effect from a lot of different angles when thinking about the environmental impact. And as I said, we like to think our business is a very environmentally conscious business in what we do in our core business offering anyway. It's just very much complementary to that.
Okay. Thank you. Now for the last minutes, I'm gonna call for a few questions from the audience. Yeah, it's on.
Here you go. Excuse me.
Oh, thank you.
Yes,
So,
please.
I'd just like to understand from the panel, as you move into your sort of IoT, is the process you go through a lot more agile compared to old-fashioned, sort of old IT? Is it more iterative? Is it more, some more dynamic?
All right, Mr. Tan, you want to start? Yeah.
So if I understand the question correctly, it's about what is after the introduction of IoT. I think, yes, in a way we are more agile, or at least that's what we would like to think we are. We start getting the data with a much lower latency, if you will. And the one that we are currently working on is actually looking at how we know how to act on the data, but we are trying to automate that as much as possible. And the objective is really about being really active to whatever happening in an event, right? So for example, in a very typical trucking business, then we can start looking at if there is a traffic along the route, and we can get the driver to take a different route, or in the sense that when there are some shipment that we put the temperature sensors in our cargo, and if we see there is a problem with the temperature hitting the threshold, we can actually interact with the drivers and route them to the nearest depot. So one of the examples.
Thank you. Do you want to add?
I would say, in terms of certification, does make things a lot easier. To certify a product to work in the GSM networks in the USA is prohibitively expensive and very, very complicated. Doing it through IoT took a lot of that complication away, and it's been a lot more straightforward. We haven't finished it yet. We're still not certified, but from the outset, it does seem a lot less cost prohibitive and a lot less complex than trying to certify for older technologies.
Okay. Daniel.
Yeah, it's certainly been my experience as well. I think that even the sheer fact that we've been able to do a soft launch with a sort of packaged product, sort of plug and play, which is meeting all the customer requirements, just shows you sort of how far we've come and how ready this product is. We're just slowing it down with the customization requirements that we have within our business. But again, we're sort of making some good headway through that. So yeah, it's been so far a really fantastic journey. It's ever changing. Even from a hardware piece, the units themselves are constantly evolving. You need to be across it. But I think as that evolves, it just creates not only streamlined process, but also greater opportunity for the ultimate solution that you're delivering.
Thank you.
So that will be